Continuing to plug away on the build, we're going to be doing a couple things this video. We're going to be checking out the new rear suspension. We're going to be checking out the rear axle rebuild, and also we're going to be filling the engine block, the water jacket to be specific, with epoxy so that we can try and stop some of those leaks that the ARP studs caused by cracking the water jacket. So let's get into it, and hopefully next video or two I can publish either the M58 or the rear diff build videos. They're really close. I'm just waiting on a couple things to finishing them up, and they're just dragging on, but I am just so close on that stuff. And once that stuff's done, we can basically get the entire rear subframe back together. And I'm also going to be showing a little bit about, I decided to rebuild the rear hubs, new wheel bearings, and there's one bushing that I wanted to replace but was having trouble finding. I kind of found some replacements, so we'll be able to do that. If not, I guess I'll just have to make my own at this point because I already ripped them out. But we'll be looking at that stuff, and hope you guys enjoy this video. So I want to finally take some footage of what I'm going to be doing for the rear and the suspension. I know a couple people are asking. I tried using my old suspension, this stuff, but it just wasn't going to work. So what I ended up doing is getting the Qa1 Racing adjustable upper mounts. These things are freaking awesome. They have this little O-ring in here too, so that they, where is it? Down here. So that they basically slot right in to that perfectly and doesn't wiggle around too much. There's also a little hole right here for the OEM bump stop, but unfortunately mine were trashed and you can't buy them new anymore. And then I ended up going with some 8-inch 550-pound springs. I think these are going to be perfect. So I'm probably going to have to adjust this so that the spring length is about 9 inches, and that should put me pretty flush with the fender for the wheel. Now the actual shock, I ended up going with these Qa1 Corvette Shocks. They are TS510. This is a famous upgrade that Aaron Summer on Volvo Speed basically brought to life years ago, and a lot of people have used these now. And they are fully adjustable shocks and really high quality, and they basically bolt directly in, but with 1 or 2 small modifications. So you can see the T-bar that it comes with is pretty short. So what you have to do is you have to buy this bar 500K kit, and this is a 5-inch T-bar kit. And the other thing you have to do is the spacing is just a little bit too small to fit it on the stock Volvo mounting bracket here. You can see that it just barely, try and get this. Come on. It just barely doesn't make it. So basically what you have to do is basically just have to open up these holes a little bit so that they're a little bit, the spacing is a little bit farther. And then these just bolt right into the strut. And you can also bend this bracket just a tiny bit. But this is basically a bolted option. You got adjustable dampening. You can have nice, strong, heavy 550-pound springs with adjustable height. And I think this is gonna work really well. You can see I got the one installed already. Well, I didn't really install it, but I'm just messing around with it. And you can see I got it bolted in perfect and plenty of room to adjust that dampening. And I also ended up buying all new OEM mounts. These things are not cheap. I actually got the last 4 in the US. It's about $300 with my discount for all of these. It's literally just four bushings. I think you can still get them, but they're going to be back ordered, so they're going to have to come from outside of the US, so they're probably going to take a couple weeks. But these are just going to be bolted in too, and all this works perfectly. You do have to put like a little nut on here as a spacer, but I will show more of that when I actually get to bolting them all together. I'm still working on a couple things here, so I wanted to just kind of test fit these and get these ready for them to go in when I'm finished up with the hubs that I'm working on over there. So modifying these was really easy. You just got to drum them with a carbide bit or something, and you basically just would have widened this hole that way on both sides and even them out. And you can see that they fit on there now perfectly. Oops. Just try and get it on. Hard to do this with one hand, but we'll see what happens. There we go. So you can see they're on there. It doesn't look like it's straight, because it's not straight when it goes down all the way, because it doesn't actually go down all the way on this. But when it actually bolts into here, you can see it is perfectly flat. It only doesn't look flat because it's bottoming out against this bracket instead of bottoming out against the bottom of the lower control arm. So these are all good now. Really easy modification. Going to be a really awesome suspension setup, and I'll let you guys know how it works out. I know a couple people running this and they absolutely love it, so I'm not worried at all about having any problems with the rear suspension. I think it's going to be great, and I think it's going to be pretty awesome having the adjustable dampening for when I launch the car, since all of the weight's going to be going to the rear. So it should help being able to adjust that if there's any kind of bounce, and these really heavy springs should help cut out a lot of bounce too, if there is any bounce on hard launches in the rear. So I'm going to keep plugging along at this, get all this, you know, more mocked up, and then I'll show you how you put these upper strut mounts on. Putting these new T-bars on the strut is extremely easy too. Just get a snap ring plier, and then you basically just got to remove one of these clips, pound the other one out, pound this one in, and put the clip back. And also obviously transfer the clip from that one to this one. Super easy, and yeah, I'm gonna get that done. Decided to replace the wheel bearings. There is no reason not to replace these. I mean, they have 200,000+ miles on them. You can see the whole inside of here is just nasty. Basically what I did is I tried smacking this out from the back, since I can't really fit this in a press, and I basically laid it in a big pipe so that it would fall down the hub, and then I basically just smacked it and broke the bearing. And then now I just need to pull this ring and just pull the rest of the bearing out, and I found replacement SKF bearings that are gonna work great, and I'm probably gonna clean some of this and paint up a little bit. Kind of a crappy job back here. So I'm gonna get those replaced, and I might even try, if I can get this shield off, I might try and replace these bushings too, which are the last bushings that I just couldn't get out. So I might give that a try. I don't know, we'll see. I might as well. And then at that point, I've replaced every single bushing in the rear subframe, literally everything. So I got the wheel bearings out, ended up using the press, finally getting back to being used to using that thing after almost killing myself. You know, getting a little bit more comfortable with it on this smaller stuff. This smaller stuff's so easy compared to those gears. But anyway, it's an SKF bearing. It's BAHB 633809AE. You can't get them from Volvo anymore. I searched this exact part number and it comes up as this bearing, but I haven't been able to find any suppliers. I found some other SKF bearings, but it's not this exact part number. So I don't know, we're gonna look for them. They're like $100 a piece. These things are definitely not cheap bearings. This other one broke apart. You can see it's like a dual cage ball bearing. You got bearings on each side. Definitely a really high quality bearing. I destroyed this one getting it out. Regardless, definitely gonna try and find some replacements or something, because might as well replace these while we are in here. There's no reason not to replace the wheel bearings, and I mean 200,000 miles on them for what we're trying to do. No thanks, I don't want to be pulling these hubs again. Probably also going to pull these back shields off. These bolts you can't get to unless you pull the hub out. They're all stripped anyway. I'm probably gonna have to drill them out because they're so rusted. But I want to try pressing this bearing or this bushing out and maybe replacing it. I found a replacement. You can't get this one from Volvo, but I did find an aftermarket, so I might try getting a new one of those. But I don't know, we'll see. We're gonna keep playing around with this on the side while working on some of the other bigger projects. One of the most critical parts of the engine refresh, and that is filling the bottom 10 or 15 millimeters with some special type of block guard epoxy that I found from EFI Race Car Tuning, Chris Boyett. So apparently this is specifically for creating block guard style type fills, but obviously we're not going to be doing a block guard. We're going to be doing it on the bottom instead of the top, but apparently this is really good stuff for filling your engine block. So we're gonna give it a try out. We got this quart container. We got some of the, we got a free Absolute shot. Ooh, Mandarin. No, this is the hardener. Probably don't wanna drink that. So we're gonna mix some of this up, and then we basically got this little ketchup bottle here. And what we're gonna do is we're basically just gonna pour it through these water cooling holes right here. And we're gonna get this block nice and level. And we're gonna fill the bottom, 10 or 15 millimeters in hopes of sealing this up, the leak here from the ARP stud crack from the inside. And then we're also gonna get some other aluminum epoxy, and we're gonna fill in all of these, holes and everything, so that everything is nice and sealed from both the inside and the outside. And we're gonna do this on both sides where all of the head bolt holes are, so that way we can try and prevent any other possible leaks if it does crack anywhere else. I also have this port plugged off with just some putty, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna fill that hole. There's a hole actually down there, you can kind of see it right there, and that's for the oil cooler, the water feed. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna fill that hole up with salt up to the top, and then after the epoxy sets, we'll drill that out with a drill bit, so that way we can still retain this hole for the oil cooler. So I'm gonna get this leveled off. I already got the inside all cleaned out. I used just a general purpose cleaner that was aluminum safe, and I ran 3 or 4 cycles of cleaner through it, 100%, and then just washed out with water and let it dry overnight upside down. And it did clean out the water jacket quite a bit, and I think this is gonna work really, really well. So we're gonna get this mixed up. We're gonna get it poured in that bottle and fill this thing up, because we wanna get that crack hopefully fixed so that it doesn't get any worse, and so that we can stop this leak, and hopefully it'll prevent some of the other ones from maybe even cracking when we torque the head back on. It really is a last-ditch effort, but I really just don't want this thing leaking anymore. It's getting on my nerves, and I wanna try and improve the strength a little bit. So we're gonna fill the inside, and we're gonna fill the outside as well, and I think it's gonna hold pretty well. So I got this on this little pallet here, and I didn't put it on the engine stand because the engine stand's not really level. It kind of hangs down on this side, so I want a perfectly even surface. So I'm gonna get the level out, get this perfectly level, and we can get on with mixing the epoxy and filling her up, and also getting that salt in that hole. Some salt first, and I put a little straw in that hole, and we're just gonna pour this down the straw into the hole and fill it up until it's just level with the bottom of the water jacket. And then after that, we're guaranteed that no epoxy is gonna drip into here and basically block this off. And then after the epoxy sets, all we gotta do is hit it with an 8mm drill bit. You can get one in there perfectly, as you can see. Basically gonna drill it like that, and then drill it out, and none of this is gonna get filled with epoxy, which we don't want because there is sealing surfaces in there and whatnot. So let's get that salt in there, and we can start mixing this epoxy. I think we have about an hour cure time, so we have a decent amount of time to work with it. And then I want to see what kind of viscosity this is like and see how it's going to pour. It should pour pretty easily out of this. If it doesn't, we can always cut a little hole in it to allow air to enter instead of having to squeeze it like ketchup or whatever. But I think it's going to work pretty well. So I'm going to get this salt in there and we'll keep going. So you can see we got that hole filled with salt. I didn't go all the way up. I left it a little bit below, so that way some of the epoxy can seep in there. And we obviously got this plugged, so none of that salt's gonna leak out. So now we're not gonna have any epoxy in this water channel. So we're gonna level this thing and we're ready to fill. Here's what the epoxy looks like. This is the resin. You can see this container is really only about a quarter full. This is 1 quart. I think 1 quart's pretty close to a liter. So we'll probably have about 250 milliliters or so to work with, which will be plenty because this is 355 milliliters. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna mix the hardener inside of here in small amounts. We're gonna keep mixing it, and then we're gonna pour it into here with a funnel. And then we're gonna go over to heat the block, and we're just gonna fill it in through these little water cooling ports. I thought about maybe trying to put it in through here, but it's just not gonna work, and it risks getting epoxy on the mating surface. So I think it's best to use these water cooling holes, and it's not gonna matter if a little bit of epoxy gets in there. We'll wipe it out anyway, as long as it doesn't get on the sealing surface or the like the fire ring surface here. So I think this is gonna work really well. So let's give it a try and see what happens. The thing I wanna point out is that we don't need to plug the water pump or take it out, because you can see the water pump is quite high up. we're not going to be going nearly as high as that water pump. We're going to be going maybe 1 centimeter or so. So maybe a quarter to a halfway up to that hole. Probably not even halfway, I would think. So salt's looking good down there. There's no other place for water to leak or epoxy to leak out except for here. But again, that's way up here, so no problems there. So we'll get this poured. There's no turning back. So I'm gonna get it leveled and we'll do the pour. The block perfectly leveled. I didn't really have to touch it at all. I was just kind of putting the level on the piston by accident, making this seem like it was up higher. Let's check this side. Perfectly level. Check this way, why not? Perfectly level. And see if we can squeeze it this way. I think it's sitting on top of this piece of plastic here, so we can't really check it that way, but I believe that it's level if the other three are. Next up, turn this nice blue color, filled about half the bottle. So let's get this poured before it starts setting. Used about, I don't know, I guess it was half. Now it's about, probably used about 2/3 of it. Maybe a little less, but you can see we got a nice, real nice fill in there, and it's everywhere. Basically went this hole, this hole, this hole, this hole, you know, this hole, this hole, this hole, this hole, all the way around. And I did that twice. And if we get a straw, we can see it's bottomed out. So you can see it's about 1 centimeter deep. So that should be perfect for what we want. We don't want to fill it up too much, but we also don't want to fill it up not enough, because I mean this crack should be on the bottom. So as long as we get a decent fill in there, we should be good. So I'm gonna let it settle. I'm gonna check the depth on a couple different areas, and then I might add a little bit more. I don't really think I need to use the whole thing. I don't wanna put too much in there, but I'm gonna check the depth and we'll see. Done pouring. I used about 3/4, so I filled the block. It was 65 millimeters depth before. Wait for him to go by, frickin' Hondas. It was 65 millimeters before, now it's about 52. So we got about a 12.5 to 13 millimeter fill, which is about 20%. So that is perfect. I'm very happy with that. That's really all you need, and that's all I wanted. So we're gonna let this set up for about pretty much overnight, and we'll do some more final depth checks. Pulled the putty out, used the vacuum to suck out all of the salt, and then I got an 8.5 millimeter drill bit. And this basically fits perfectly right in here and is exactly where you need to drill the hole. And I just did it in really small, slow increments. And you can see it came out absolutely perfect. And then just suck all of the shavings and everything out with the vacuum. And I would use a little straw down here too, hooked up to the vacuum. And now we got our coolant passage drilled. And you can also see that there's still a little bit of room on each side. It's really hard to get focused, but there is still epoxy around here. So if this somehow cracks, then there's still a little bit of epoxy to keep the water in. Doing some depth checks. I got this zeroed out at 65, and let's see, it's about 14, 15, 14, 13. So it's between 12.5 and 15, which is perfect. It's about 1/2 inch. It's really all I wanted to fill. Didn't want to do too much because I didn't want to lose too much cooling capacity, but I didn't want to not do enough and not maybe possibly cover up all the cracks. So I'm gonna get this thing back on the stand. I'm gonna fill it up with water, and I'm gonna let it sit overnight and make sure we don't get any drips here. And if we don't, we're gonna drain it back out, let it dry, and then I ordered some other aluminum epoxy that we are gonna do, basically fill in the ribbing here and here and here, and probably just this area, because this is really the only area that cracked. I don't think anything else is gonna crack, hopefully not, knock on wood, when we switch to torque back to, you know, stretch bolts. I might also put a little bit around here and on this side, because this is where I drilled the hole. So just in case maybe the drill scraped and didn't get, I mean, it looks like there's a decent little lip around that hole blocking off like this area, but just in case, we're probably gonna fill this too. and there aren't any other spots where any cracks were. It was really just the one crack right here. This was really the bad one. These other two were, I think they might have been cracked, but I mean, I never really seen them leak out of here. I just decided we're gonna fill this one, and this one. But this one was the worst, and it's a good 15 millimeters here. So I think that's gonna be plenty. So I'm working on a new prototype transmission mount. You can see the old one was just way too bulky, way too big, way too much going on. You can see how much we simplified it. Like I simplified it so much. And this plate is actually gonna be more out. It's gonna be right about here. So it's actually gonna put more of this weight on the actual mount. You can see how it's kind of flexing a little bit because most of the weight is here. But that's gonna be resolved. I have to fix this bolt hole a little bit. You can see I gotta move, probably move this plate, make it a little bit thicker so that it can go into that little tab right there, which will prevent the mount from spinning when you're actually torquing the nut. So I gotta make a couple small adjustments here, but the angle gear fits on pretty well. I also gotta change the radius right here so that it clears this flange a little bit better, but I think this is gonna work out pretty well. Probably gonna do this out of steel, and then we're obviously gonna weld these to here and probably put some bolts through the center. And again, this is gonna be over more, so more of the load is actually being put on the mount. But this is gonna allow people to adapt M66s to the P80 front wheel drive subframe, or M58s from P2s to the P80 front wheel drive subframe. Here, I can get my fingers under there, so we shouldn't have any problems with the angle gear hitting the steering rack crossover tubes. I lifted the engine up a little bit with the hoist, and here you can see it leveled out a little bit more, but it's gonna look something like that when it's all said and done. So I'm gonna work on playing around with some of this stuff and maybe make one more revision on this plate, and hopefully get this thing off to the laser cut shop real soon so we can get this done with, because I'm gonna have a lot of parts coming in soon for the whole rebuild and everything. Well, not the rebuild, but the refresh, and all the gasket seals and everything. And we're gonna be getting the angle gear seals in too soon. That's gonna be done real soon. Hopefully the rear diff. And then just waiting on a couple things for the hub, like new bushings here, new wheel bearings, and we can slap them back together and get that whole rear subframe hopefully together finally, because it's been dragging on. And obviously we'll be getting in some CVs soon for the inner CVs. Been like 3 weeks waiting on those from Volvo, but I mean, they've been back ordered, but they're coming in sometime this week. So stay tuned, guys. We're gonna hopefully have a lot more cool stuff coming up soon, rather than just, you know, mocking up stuff, test fitting stuff, painting engine bays, painting brake calipers and whatnot. I got a lot of cool videos coming up, so much footage, and hopefully they're gonna be done soon.